So my name is Sylvie Rollason-Cass. I'm a web archivist with the Archivist service at the Internet Archive. So what I'm going to talk about today is the Community Webs project. It's an IMLS grant-funded project to bring web archiving to public libraries. The full title, Community Webs, Creating Community History Web Archives. So I'm just going to talk briefly about what web archiving is. It sounds like maybe you're familiar with it. I'm just going to do that quickly. Who's doing it? I'm going to talk a little bit about the Community Webs project, and then I'm going to hand things over to Natalie, who's going to talk about what they're doing. She's one of our Community Webs library leader partners, so she's going to talk a little bit about what they're doing. So to get started, I'm going to start at the beginning with the Internet Archive. If you are not familiar, we are a nonprofit digital library and archive located in San Francisco, California. We were founded in 1996 by Brewster Kahle and then officially designated a library by the state of California in 2007. We have digital books, music, video, television. There's an internet arcade. You can go play old video games, use software, but we're probably best known for the Wayback Machine, if anyone has ever used this. It's the largest publicly available web archive. It has over 302 billion unique web pages that make up over 100 million websites. These are in over 150 languages, and since this started in 1996, and we're continuing to add at a rate of about 1 billion new URLs every week. So it's continuing to grow. So when I talk about web archiving, we're talking about recreating the same experience that you would have if you were visiting a live website on the day that it was archived. So you might be able to, so if you were going to use the Wayback Machine, you could go take a look at yahoo.com from, January 1st, 2000, if you wanted to, and interact with it the same way you would if you were actually looking at it that day. So the process is capturing as much information as possible from the original web resource, and then using these resources to play back the archived version of the site. So this is just sort of a visual. It's nasa.gov from 1996. It's pretty simple, kind of basic. 2007, starting to get a bit more dynamic. And then this was the live web in August of 2017, so it's much different over time. So why is this important? Data scientists at the Internet Archive, but at other organizations as well, have determined that the average lifespan of information on the web is about 92 days. That's before it either changes, it moves, or it comes offline entirely. So the Wayback Machine is really great for getting a broad snapshot of the web. And chances are most websites that are represented in it one way or another. But we were hearing from some of our library partners about 10 years ago that they wanted more curatorial control over the content that was being archived. So in 2006, we worked with a small group of libraries at the Internet Archive to introduce the Archivist web archiving service. We use a subscription model to provide access to a web-based application that allows users to curate, manage, store, and provide access to collections of archived websites. It's fully hosted. That means there's nothing to download or install. And aside from computer access, there's no additional hardware that's needed to use it. The content is all stored at the Internet Archive. So the priority of Archivist is to make web archiving accessible to memory institutions and to make the content that they archive as accessible to their patrons as possible. So this is an example of the public access page. I don't know if you see my cursor. Maybe not. This is a collection on First Nations and Indigenous community websites that the University of British Columbia, one of our partner organizations, created. This is the landing page on archivist.org. And then they provide access to the websites that they've captured and archived. This is an example on the right of an archived website in Archivist. That banner at the top lets you know that it is an archived website. It shows you who chose to archive it and the date that it was captured on. So web archiving is a relatively new field, and it's a growing community. So this is sort of a visualization of The institutions that have active web archiving programs, as reported in the 2014 NDSA survey, as you can see, most of them are college and universities, some archives, some state governments. They make up the bulk of the organizations that are doing web archiving. And then a lot of these smaller ones here are much less represented. So we decided to focus on public libraries for this project, the Community Webs project, because they are not only vital to the communities that they serve as information resources, but they're also often stewards of local history. And the question comes up, what happens when information about local communities is being produced almost exclusively on the web? So consider where you might look for information on an event in your town or county. More often than not, it's going to be on maybe Facebook or a blog or something like that. More local governments are publishing their meeting minutes, things like that, on the web, as opposed to providing physical copies. So being able to actually preserve this information is growing more and more important for public libraries. So that's why we decided to focus on them and finding solutions to the roadblocks that many public libraries see as being apparent for developing web archiving programs. So we identified some of these roadblocks that public libraries feel they have. Primarily, it's the lack of funding, but I think a lot of this stems from a lack of institutional buy-in, so maybe it's not apparent that this is an important area that needs to be developed. There is a lack of training resources out there on web archiving. We know that staff time can be tight, and then many organizations don't know the technical requirements for having a web archiving program. They might think they need to buy, a server to host all of their data. So we're trying to kind of minimize these roadblocks, and that's where the Community Webs program comes in. So the Community Webs program is a 2-year IMLS and Cale Austin grant-funded program to empower public libraries to build collections of historically valuable web-published materials that document their local communities. So we opened up applications this summer, and we received 110. Initially, we had 5 library lead partners and 10 open spaces. So we had to select 10 applications from the 110 that we received. We were lucky enough to get some additional funding for 13 more slots, so that brought us to a cohort of 28 small, medium, and large public libraries. We defined public libraries as any library that provides free access to their resources to the communities that they serve. This is a list of the libraries that are participating in this cohort. Tribal libraries are still widely underrepresented, but of the 28 participating libraries, 3 did report serving local tribal communities as a part of the larger communities that they serve. So the cohort members are going to be participating in online and in-person meetings. We'll have 3 online meetings each year and 1 in-person meeting, and that's for 2 years. They're going to be participating in and providing feedback in an online course space on web archiving and community engagement in building web archive collections. This is something that's provided by Web Junction from OCLC. They're going to be collaborating with their local communities to build web archive collections using Archivist. We've heard from Archivist users that they generally spend, I think on average, about 2 hours per week on their web archive collections. There's some initial setup time required, but once things are kind of rolling, then it's about 2 hours per week. So the staff time is there, but not too significant. And then the participants are also going to be contributing to blogs and other outreach to the wider public library community. So at the end of the 2-year program, we're going to have a corpus of publicly available web archiving documentation and training resources for public libraries. So that's what they're working on now. We have a set of training materials that they're going to be using and building on, so they're kind of the guinea pigs. And then once the program is done, we will be able to make that public so anyone can use it. We'll have a cohort of leaders in the library field of local history web archiving who can share their experiences with others. And then over 40 terabytes of archived local history web content will be available in public. So I'm going to turn things over to Natalie, who's going to talk a little bit about the Queens Library.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Natalie. I have two titles at Queens Public Library in New York City. One is that I head up the Metadata Services Division, and the other is that I'm the director of the Queens Memory Program. So I'll be telling you a little bit about what I do in both of those roles to give you some context. So this is our team, most of it anyway, in metadata services. We do all the cataloging for our collections. We catalog in materials that are in over 30 languages because Queens is one of the most ethnically diverse places in the country, if not in the world. And so a lot of the people you see in this picture are catalogers for whole language groups. You have somebody who handles everything that's in a Cyrillic language, for example. And so anything that comes in that's Russian or anything, she's also learned Georgian. So we have just a really interesting team that we're working with. We're also doing digitization, and we're scanning all of the local history collections that are in our archives, and we're creating metadata for those things, or sometimes just transcribing the scratches that are on the outsides of envelopes that were left by archivists many years ago and making those into records for those materials. And then as a third activity that we do within metadata services, we do the Queens Memory Program, which is really a crowdsourced collecting program for local history. So a little bit more about Queens Memory. This is how I came to the library. I started this program in 2010, and then they made it. They made a position for me and a place that's a permanent place for Queens Memory at the library in 2012. So we do a combination of things. We do scanning days. Like this picture on the left is actually from our very first scanning day that we did. They were in response to Hurricane Sandy. After the hurricane hit some of the low-lying southern areas in Queens, like the Rockaways and Broad Channel, if you've heard of these communities, the people who lived there brought us the things that had managed to survive the floods. And they were like, okay, we need to scan these now, and we need to make sure that we have a digital copy of them as well as a physical copy. So we started doing these scanning days, and what we found was that we got really excellent metadata for all of these records, and then we could add them to our online collections. So there's nothing like asking the person who took the picture, who's in the picture, and when it was taken, and where it was taken, and a little bit about the event that was happening. So we're getting really kind of amazing stuff, and a lot of times the conversations that we're having are with people who feel that their stories are not relevant or important in history with a capital H in New York City. And we have a lot of conversations with people telling them that their stories are actually the things that people are going to be so interested in knowing, especially, we really think about things 100 years out, and we know that in 100 years, people will be coming in and really looking for instance, stories of new immigrants living in Queens at the dawn of the Trump era. Like, this is a good research topic. I'm like, I promise people will be interested in hearing your stories. And then we also, on the right is a picture of one of our interviewer trainings. So we also try to really empower people to interview their neighbors, their family members, their teachers, people in their religious communities, because we feel that they're going to know better than we are who the really important people to interview are, who need to be in the public library's local history collections. And so we try to empower people with, just the tools of a good interviewer, how to ask good questions, how to make sure the recorder's working. It's not really that hard. I mean, what we need from them is for them to leverage their existing relationships with people who they want to interview. So we find that we get much better interviews and in languages that people feel comfortable speaking in, and then we worry about finding ways to process those materials afterwards. And it helps to have a really diverse team working at the library so that you can handle materials that are in multiple languages. So those are the main activities of Queen's Memory, and we really see our role as just democratizing the process of history making and trying to put the tools of history makers into the hands of people who we serve at the library. So when we started doing web archiving, I took this on because I really felt like my role at the library was kind of at an intersection between technical services and local history work. And I thought it would be important to get the buy-in of stakeholders that were internal stakeholders. So if you're thinking about doing some web archiving at your organization, it might be smart to make sure that people who can support that effort are getting web archiving that they feel is important too. So in my case, it's this giant, big institution. So I had a communications department, I had a government affairs department, and I also had the archivists who work in our local history collections. And so I enlisted all three of them to give me a wish list of all of the different websites that they believed would be good candidates for web archiving. So from the communications department, of course, they said, well, we need to be doing web archiving on our own websites. That was kind of a no-brainer. But we also were interested in getting local newspapers and, of course, any news story that's published about our activities as a library. So it's really a way of documenting the press that we get and the coverage of things that we're doing out in the community. Our government affairs office was interested in following our local officials. So there were a lot of social media sites that we started following in web archiving because of them. So, for instance, in New York City, there are 5 boroughs, and each borough has its own president. And so we're following our borough president's social medias. We follow her Flickr page. And what we found is that she has really great documentation of everything that's going on in the borough. So it's an excellent way to get the names and faces of people who are doing things in the communities, which will be very helpful to future researchers. And then our archivist just gave us a whole list of websites that are either local historical societies who are no longer publishing a physical newsletter, but often just making changes on their websites and then not doing their own web archiving. So we captured a lot of local history organizations, and then also some just enthusiastic Queens residents who are doing a lot of, there's a website called Forgotten Queens, and one that's called something like Queens Why Leave or something. So, but they're made by these passionate amateurs who are taking just exhaustive photo documentation of the entire borough and everything that's going on there. So they're amazing collections for us to have. And those sites are also pretty fragile. I mean, if one person is running it, even if they're doing a great job, it's just one person, and they don't have a whole staff around them. They don't necessarily have the money to continue with their hosting from year to year. So we really see those things as ephemeral treasures that we're trying to keep. So after gathering everybody's wish lists, we very quickly met our 0.5 terabyte data budget that we bought with the Internet Archive. And so one of the things that's exciting about this project is having just a little bit more of a data budget to use. So this project that Sylvie was just telling you about, Community Webs, is going to be a great opportunity. I was mentioning that I see my role as the intersection of technical services and local history, but there's a kind of third plank in that work that we're doing, which is the community engagement piece. And that has been the thing that has been missing. We've had the voices of our internal stakeholders represented in what we're doing web archiving for, but we haven't been able to reach out more directly to community members. So in cases like we did a Wikipedia edit-a-thon where we brought in all of these local historians who never usually work together or can even be invited to the same events. And we had them working shoulder to shoulder and setting up their Wikipedia user accounts and then making really great edits to Wikipedia. And then we also have events like the one pictured on the left, which is we call Volunteers in the Vaults, where all of our active volunteers who are out recording oral history interviews, doing photo documentation, creating wild sound recordings of public places and adding those to our collections. We invite them to come every other month and meet one another and then also get to see some of the treasures in our collections. And so we're hoping to turn some of these kinds of events into spaces where we can start talking about web archiving and try to get people who are already engaged with the history and the doings of their communities and get them to start thinking about what websites would be good to capture. We're also interested in using some of the lesson plans that Internet Archive has produced. There are some really great things. There's a link on the bottom here, and you have it also on the little half sheet of paper, and there are more, if you didn't get one, that are in the end of the table. These are really good and thoughtful lesson plans for students of different ages that get them thinking about investigating an information resource online. So what is a good, reliable source of information? How can you tell? And then what websites are maybe things that are ephemeral, that are not going to be supported by either a government office or a business that's unlikely to go away. So starting to think about some of those things, like what local history organizations maybe have websites that we should be protecting and doing web archiving on. So the lesson plan, which I think maybe I won't open today, but feel free to go and look at it on the website. It really takes the students through the process of investigating and examining websites as information resources, and then having a whole bunch of candidate websites that they all then debate and decide which ones are most relevant for historical preservation. And they're writing essays and defending their arguments, and then in the end actually working with the technology tools to do some of the seed crawls. So in our case, I think that we would just have them nominate websites, and then we would actually be doing the web crawls ourselves in our collections. But I think that's what we're planning on doing, and we'll have to check in with you in a year or 2 years when we are actually well into the project and let you know how it's working out.